you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz! And I'm here today to review the 1974 thriller The Conversation, starring Gene Hackman, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. When talking about the best directors of all time, like directors that have made fantastic movies, specifically with people online, who gets mentioned? Bergman, Kurosawa, Scorsese, Nolan, Paul Thomas Anderson, number of others. Spielberg also gets mentioned and then gets derived. Cameron gets also mentioned. But no one really mentions Francis Ford Coppola. All you have to do is remind those people Francis Ford Coppola did The Godfather and go, oh yeah, good point. Or Apocalypse Now, go, oh yeah, good point. But I think the reason why Francis Ford Coppola does not get a lot of mention now is because of recency bias. His run in the 70s are amazing to think about. So you had the Godfather movies, you had The Conversation, and you had Apocalypse Now. 3 films that are considered all-time greats. Like, that is amazing if you think about it. And right there, to me, that would rank him up as some of the best directors of all time. But he gets no mention because the films after that haven't been so hot. I mean, I think the best 3 films that I have heard of people who like Francis Ford Coppola after the 70s are Rumblefish, Outsiders, John Grisham's The Rainmaker, and that's it. Those are the 3. You might get somebody who say, actually, The Godfather Part 3 is pretty good. It's not as good as the other 2 Godfathers, but that kind of counts. I'm like, sure, you could argue that. But you would have to admit that there has been a precipitous drop in the quality that Francis Ford Coppola has done ever since the 70s films were done, which leads to a lot of people not considering him one of the best filmmakers of all time. Now, there could be another argument, too, of saying, oh, there's plenty of directors who made great films once, and that was it. They only made that one great film. That doesn't make them great directors. But in Francis Ford Coppola, he had a whole decade of incredible films. And we're talking about the one film that probably gets the least talk, which is The Conversation. So why don't we get into the review? Let's get to the review of The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And before we get into the review, let's get into the plot. Harry Cole is a surveillance expert. He is hired by a mysterious client to record a conversation of a young couple. Once he gets the tape and starts to develop it, he starts to realize that these people might be in danger. So he becomes paranoid as to what's going to happen with this couple and what he needs to do to prevent something bad happening to these people. To go any more into it, we'll probably go into spoilers, so I'm going to keep it right there. Now that we've gotten to the plot, let's get to my 3 points of what I think about The Conversation. My first point is, shows quiet, suffocating paranoia well. A lot of films, when they deal with paranoia, it's always an existential threat that will violently murder them. It's more used, I would say, in horror or in espionage thrillers where it is clear that they're in danger. They just don't know where it's coming from. The Conversation's a little different because is Harry in danger or is he just paranoid? The film really messes with your perspective in it, where all he had to do was hand the tapes over and that was it. But he didn't. He had a crisis of conscience. And now he feels like he's in danger. The film kind of questions that, whether he's in danger or not, or that the people that want information will get it by other means. The way that they show the paranoia, it ratchets up ever so slightly throughout the entirety of the film, but it does it quietly. And I think what makes it incredibly effective in this way is that there's not a lot of boom, there's not a lot of whiz-bang, there's not a lot of, I would say, cinematic flair in this movie that likes to grandize what's going on. It is still a very quiet, very deliberate film that utilizes the paranoia through quiet and what little is going on. I think it was very effective with that, and I think it's one of the highlights of this film. Point number 2, it features an understated, commanding performance by Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is not an actor that you would watch and say he's good at reserved performances, quiet performances. He is much more, maybe not a bombastic guy, but he is an actor who plays characters that command respect, have not maybe just a ruthless aggression, but a man you would fear not physically, but someone who could tear you down in numerous ways. I guess the best way is he plays arrogance pretty well. Even in his later years, when he would still do movies and he would do movies of those types, it would still be of that same breath, except for maybe the Royal Tenenbaums, where he was still arrogant. It was much more comedic in that movie. Great movie, by the way. He was really good in it. This is a very different performance I'm used to in seeing Gene Hackman, because he's very quiet. He's very reserved. And his performance is more in his mannerisms and his eyes and what he does with his body more than what he would do with his booming voice and personality. It is very much a reserved performance that I didn't think Hackman had in him, and I think it's a very good performance. If you want to see a different side of Gene Hackman, I would say this is a great movie to check out and just see how good of a performance he has in this. And my third point, the twist doesn't surprise until it does. What do I mean by this? Okay, so without spoiling the movie itself, the twist of the film, I could see a mile away coming. Like within about 20 to 30 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, this is what this is about. The worst thing for a twist is to be figured out so quickly. It is something that even if someone were to figure it out as the film goes on, you want them to figure it out by the third act. You don't want them to figure it out by the end of the first, which is what I did in this film. That said, even though the twist is figured out, something still surprises you at the end, where the twist becomes much more effective by the end of the film. I will say that throughout most of the film, I was pretty disappointed by what the twist is, but by the end, it resurrects itself into a good twist that I actually was pretty surprised by. It's kind of confusing, but I don't want to spoil exactly what the twist is and what makes the twist viable at the end. But I will say that if you're like me, you might watch this film and be like, oh, I know what this twist is right away. Stick with it. I think you will actually enjoy what the film does with it. So who do I recommend this for? I recommend this for people who prefer adult-minded thrillers. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I'm talking like films like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, something that is much more focused on character work, dialogue, and providing a scene than a lot of action, violence, and stuff like that. There is a little bit of violence in the movie, but it's for the most part a film about a character. And if you prefer that type of movie, this is definitely something I think you should get your hands on. And then I'd also recommend this for people who prefer slow burn films. What do I mean by a slow burn film? The film, instead of giving you a lot of action, a lot of drama throughout the film to keep you occupied, it simmers the drama as the film goes on. It kind of just rises up into a crescendo at the end. So if you are willing to sit through a slow burn film like that, I would say this is a very good one of those. Who do I not recommend this for? I do not recommend this for people if you do not like quiet in your movies. The Conversation is a very deliberate film. The film has dialogue when it's necessary. Otherwise, it does linger in quiet a lot. And if you want a lot of dialogue or a lot of things happening in a film, this is not your film. I would say avoid this. And I would not recommend this for someone who hates repetition or is annoyed by repetition, I would say. A lot of the conversation deals with repetition, specifically the first scene in the film, which is the actual conversation that's being recorded for the client of Harry Cole. You're going to hear that conversation come up numerous times. So if that annoys you and if you do not like that, maybe sit this out, because it is important to keep rehearing that conversation as the film goes, because it does open up things about the film. So if you don't like that, I'd say avoid this. Overall, I do recommend The Conversation. I think it's a good film. I think it is a pretty effective thriller when it uses quiet and repetition in that way. I've heard some people say this is Coppola's best film, and I have to question why, to be absolutely honest. I understand why this is such a quiet film, or why a lot of people don't talk about this as some of Coppola's best work, but I'm not going to sit here and also say, oh, it's better than The Godfather. No, come on. Let's be real here. It's a good film. It's something that is a little different than I'm used to from Coppola. And because of that, I think it's a very curious film. If you're interested in watching Coppola's 70s film that pretty much made his career, I think you should see it just to see exactly how diverse he was being at the time with The Godfathers and with Apocalypse Now. As a curiosity, I would say watch it then. But if you're also into adult-minded thrillers, I would say also check this out. Otherwise, I think this is a very limited audience film. I think a certain type of person will want to watch this film and enjoy it. But I did like it, so I would recommend The Conversation. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. So on Thursday, I'm going to start up reviewing the entire filmography of the James Bond series. I cannot believe I actually thought this was a good idea. Good Lord, I am going to regret this by June. You can just feel it. I can feel myself by June going, oh my God, how many more shaken not stirs do I have to hear? But yeah, I'm doing that. I've already like said I'm going to do it, so boom, I'm there. Saturday, me and Kim are going to review The Theory of Everything, the Stephen Hawking biopic. Check that out on Saturday. On Tuesday, the theme will be past Best Picture Oscar winners. I believe that same week, the Oscars are going to announce their nominees. And it's going to be an interesting year. So on Tuesday, I'm going to watch a movie that won Best Picture the year it came out, and that is John Ford's How Green Was My Valley. I have become more and more of a fan of John Ford. I honestly thought he was just the cowboy director. He did The Searchers, he did Stagecoach, both great films. And The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, my number 2 favorite film of last year. But the more I look at his filmography, there's a bunch of other different things. And this popped up here, and I'm interested in seeing this since I've liked John Ford stuff, and it's a Best Picture winner. Thursday, we're going to start watching all the Bond films, starting with Dr. No. Saturday, me and Kim are reviewing The Theory of Everything. And Tuesday, I'm going to review How Green Was My Valley. I am The Wiz, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.